I must have noticed, I wasn't paying much attention. I don't know what I was thinking about, but I must have noticed there was this young couple that had a baby in a baby carrier, and they had placed it on top of the luggage carrier, and top of the luggage about this high, off the ground. And the father must have wandered away or something, but the corner of my eye saw that baby kick, and that baby carrier was rolling off toward the hard floor. And I didn't think, I didn't deliberate, I watched myself just go like this. And I caught the edge of that thing just as it was turning, and I grabbed the side of it. And then about a second later, the mother grabbed the other side, and she would have been too late. And as I held onto it, I looked at that woman and I said, that was scary. It was physically, biologically scary when that happened. And of course I gave the baby back to the mother, but and you should have seen the look she gave her husband. That was and then later when she was going through the gate, she turned around and looked at me like, was that an angel? Whoa, an atheist angel, you know? So why did I do that? You would have done the same thing, right? Most of you would have done the same thing. There's an instinctive impulses, feelings that we have that don't require some type of sophisticated, well-articulated moral philosophy that we have to think through. There's a part of our being that evolved to be compassionate, to be cooperative, to be social, to be caring, to be protective, to be sacrificial, to be moral human beings. We have a moral sense within us. Thomas Jefferson noticed that. Thomas Jefferson was thinking about morality, and he wrote a letter to a friend, and he said, if we did a good act merely from the love of God and a belief that it's pleasing to Him, whence arises the morality of the atheist? And then he listed a bunch of atheists that he knew, and he said, these are good people. These atheists are good people. He named them. And he said, their virtue then must have had some other foundation than the love of God. There are millions of good people on this continent. There are tens and hundreds of millions of people on this planet who do not believe in a God, do not believe in an absolute morality. We are atheists, we are agnostics. In fact, we are the fastest growing section of America right now. We're growing faster than any of the other religions. And we are good people. We put the lie to the Bible. The Bible says we cannot exist. Did you know that in Psalm 14:1? The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. They are all corrupt. They have never done a good thing. If you think atheists can do good things, then you agree with me that the Bible is wrong. The biblical system of morality is wrong. The Bible makes mistakes. Obviously, the Bible makes many mistakes, and that's just one of them. It's a good thing there are no absolute moral values. If there were, we couldn't improve. If absolute moral values existed, we couldn't have got rid of slavery. We could not have allowed women to vote. We could not have tolerated interracial marriage. If we had absolute moral values, then we would not be allowing gays and lesbians to marry, which is a good thing that society is progressing. We are breaking out of absolutes. Absolutes hold you back. It is a good thing that morality is relative and should be relative, because then it's free to improve. Absolute morality is a danger to morality because it does not consider the situation or the context of the actions. I think Lucas, in his very well-meaning talk, is confusing a couple of terms. He seems to be treating the word absolute as identical to the word objective. There are no absolute standards and there's no absolute basis for morality, but there is an objective basis for morality. And I will talk about exactly what that is later. Much superior to the morality of the Bible, much superior to a so-called absolute moral code. But look at the Bible for a minute. In the Bible, morality is not based on human needs and human wants. The whole book of the Bible is based on God's glory and God's holiness. The way to be good is to follow the rules of the dictator. You must worship him on a certain day of the week. You must follow those commandments. There are certain things you can say or you can't. What happens? The Sabbath commandment, for example. If the Ten Commandments or the Christian system is an absolute system for moral values, well, there's the Sabbath. That's one of the big 10. It's in there. We should worship the Sabbath. There's an example in the book of Numbers about what happened to a man who was found committing a horrible crime on the Sabbath. You know what he was doing? He was picking up sticks. A man was found picking up sticks on the Sabbath. So the people came to Moses and said, "We caught him. He's picking up sticks." I don't know what he's going to do, build a fire for his family? Who knows? But he was picking up sticks, which I don't think any of us would consider to be a crime. Would you? Picking up sticks? Anyway, it was on the Sabbath. And God's ego, God's vanity had to be worshipped and obeyed and honored. And if he said, "Don't work on the Sabbath," then we better not work on the Sabbath or else. You know what they did to that man? They asked Moses, "What should we do?" And Moses asked God, and God said, "Well, he has to die." So they took him outside the camp and they stoned him to death for the crime of picking up sticks on the Sabbath. The Bible is a horrible moral guide. The biblical examples that are in there are beneath the dignity of a modern informed moral society. There's another case where the Ten Commandments were being brought back to the Israelites, and they rejoiced to see the Ark of the Covenant. And they said, "Is it really the Philistines who were bringing it back?" And so the farmers went, "It is." And they looked at it, they touched it, and they worshiped God. They made a fire, and they sacrificed an animal. Praise God, because now the Ark, the Ten Commandments have come back to their rightful owner. And you know what God did to those farmers? He killed those farmers. And he killed 50,000 people in the city of Beth Shemesh. Read that story. Because they weren't supposed to look at it. They broke the rules. Is that a moral teaching? That's more like following the rules of some egotistical dictator who says, "You need to do what I say or else." In the Bible, there's no acknowledgement that human beings have any inherent respect to be treated with decency or to be treated with fairness. You don't find that in the Bible. In the Bible, you have human beings are worms. We're sinners. We are depraved. We are bad. We deserve eternal torment. And then we need to submit ourselves to the will of this dictator. How can you have any moral faculty if you're cowering in fear beneath the will of a dictator who's going to punish you forever in a hell? Any system of thought that has a threat of violence in it is morally bankrupt. The Bible is based to a large degree on a threat of violence. How many children go to bed at night afraid they're going to go to hell because of the teaching of this book? It is a bad teaching. It is a bad book. And if you hold that book under your arm with any pride, you don't know what morality even means. The Ten Commandments are an ineffective moral guide. Only 3 of them have any relevance to modern American law: killing, stealing, and perjury. The rest 4 of them aren't even moral at all. What kind of language you should speak. They directly contradict our First Amendment. They are to establish the nation of Israel, not the United States of America. If the Bible is such a good moral guide, if it is the absolute source of moral values, then why is it that believers do not agree on what these values are? Let me ask you, what are some of the big social issues we're struggling with right now in society? What are they? Stem cell research, abortion rights, what else? Gay marriage, birth control, the war, doctor-assisted suicide, you name it. There's a big list of things that society is struggling with. And corporal punishment, gun control, protecting the environment. You will find really good Christians who go to church. They love God, they love Jesus, they are faithful, and they pray, and they have good families, and they're good moral people. You will find them on both sides of those issues. You will find them marching in opposite marches of the same issue. There is no absolute moral guidance in the Bible. If there were, we would know it. We would see it. Everybody can open that book and prove to you, well, we have the truth and the others are wrong in some way. Birth control, for example, is a blessing, and yet there are churches, well, Lucas's church thinks birth control is a sin, when actually birth control is, the opposition to birth control is contributing to misery, is contributing to the lack of well-being in the world. If the Pope weren't so religious, he could start promoting something truly moral, truly valuable, like birth control and family planning. He's too religious to care about human values. What the church cares about is godly values. His honor, His glory, His majesty has to be honored above and above. And human race be damned because God has to be glorified. If you pick up sticks on the Sabbath, or if you touch the Ten Commandments, or if you do something that offends his fragile ego, you have to be punished. That's the morality of the Bible. You mentioned biblical role models, and they're not good moral role models. Jesus was probably one of the worst. Jesus did say a few things and did a couple things, but he advocated feeding of slaves. He advocated he advocated castration. Did you know that? He said there are some eunuchs which were born eunuchs, some were made eunuchs by men, and some made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Some of the early church fathers took that verse, and they took a knife to themselves because Jesus said you should do that. I never preached a sermon on that verse, by the way, to my credit. I know people say that means to reject marriage, but that's not the words he used. He talked about a lake of fire, and people would, 5 minutes, thanks. A lake of fire and a place of burning. And he talked about cutting off body parts, and he wasted precious ointment rather than sell the ointment to feed the poor, saying, you will always have the poor with you, you won't have me. He never instituted any programs to help the poor. He did a couple things, but he said a couple things, but never did anything. So on balance, even though Jesus said a couple of good things, on balance, he was not a good moral example. The gods of the Bible, the patriarchs of the Bible, you or I are better than that. Anyone in this room is smarter than Jesus and kinder than Jesus ever was. And why do we need to look to these flawed, ancient, primitive, uninformed, unscientific, unhistorical role models when we have people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was an atheist, who worked for half a century for women's rights, battling the church, who brought women the freedom to vote? There is real morality. There is an objective basis for moral values, but it's not absolute. And it's really quite simple. I think a lot of religions try to make morality into this big mystery, big capital M. How do we know what to do? And by the way, notice that Lucas did not even tell us how do we know what to do. He just referred to some vague idea of some spiritual thing up there that's supposed to tell us. But he didn't tell us how do we decide those moral issues. He didn't tell us how do we know whether doctor-assisted suicide is right or wrong. He didn't give us any actual guidance. Well, I'm going to give you some actual guidance. Instead of using the ego and the glory and the holiness of a non-existent deity against which to measure and to take our orders from, instead of using the Christian or theistic measure for morality, the true measure for morality is humanity. That's what humanism means. Not all atheists are humanists, but I think most of us atheists would call ourselves humanists. What do humans need? What do humans want? Not who cares what a God needs or wants. Who cares whether his feet are being properly kissed or he's being honored right? What difference does that make, whether you believe in that being or not? But the important thing is human beings. We evolved as natural biological animals with certain needs and a certain built-in recoil from pain and from harm. All